Hello, everyone. My name is Pilar Nelson. I am a community director here at UMass Boston, and I had the unique pleasure of chairing this year's planning committee for Black Lives Matters Day here at UMass Boston. Black Lives Matters Day is a human rights issue. BLM Day at UMass Boston is dedicated to those who have been unjustly harmed and/or killed as a result of police brutality, acts of anti-Black racism, and systematic oppression. On this day, we shall highlight individuals and groups from UMass Boston, the broader Boston community, across the US and the world, who have worked as activists within the BLM movement. On this day at UMass Boston, we also seek to provide a comprehensive learning, reflective, and growth experience centered on generating awareness of systematic anti-Black racism and injustice, and to promote positive change to redress these issues in society. This year's theme is setting the foundation as we look forward to building on the day and years to come. I would like to introduce to you this evening our keynote speaker, Dr. Joseph N. Cooper. Dr. Cooper is the Dr. J. Keith Motley Endowed Chair of Sports Leadership and Administration. He also is an associate professor in the Leadership and Education Department in the College of Education and Human Development at UMass Boston. He earned his bachelor's degrees in sociology, recreation administration, from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His master's degree in sports administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he also earned a doctorate from the University of Georgia. His research agenda focuses on the intersection between sport, education, race, and culture, with an emphasis on sport involvement as a catalyst for holistic development. He is also the faculty founder of Collective Uplift, an organization designed to educate, empower, inspire, and support individuals to maximize their holistic potential both within and beyond athletic contexts. As a result of his research, he earned some of the following recognitions: the 2016 UConn African American Cultural Center Faculty Award, the 2016 Harvard E. Beach Black Alumni Reunion Young Alumni Award from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He also has won the 2019 UConn National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Youth and College Chapter Faculty Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Cooper has also been cited in various media outlets, including but not limited to the New York Times, Boston Globe, ESPN, ABC News, Yahoo, Diverse Issues in Higher Education, and CBS Sports. He is the author from Exportation Back to Empowerment, Black Male Holistic Underdevelopment Through Sport and Miseducation. He has a forthcoming book titled A Legacy of African American Resistance and Activists Through Sport, which is slated to be published winter 2020. Please help me welcome our keynote speaker for this evening, Dr. Joseph Cooper.
Thank you, Pilar. Good evening, UMass Boston community. First, I want to thank the BLM Day Committee for organizing this important and necessary event. I also would like to thank Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco for his leadership and support for this important initiative. The commemoration of this day signifies the university's commitment to honoring Black lives and eliminating anti-Black racism at the systemic, institutional, and interpersonal levels. Today, we celebrate Black people and Blackness. Black lives matter. Black people matter. Black fathers, Black mothers, Black brothers, Black sisters, Black friends, Black communities, Black businesses, Black institutions, Black cultures, and Black legacies matter. Over 4 centuries ago, Black resistance in the United States and internationally was grounded in a broader social movement with the same acronym of BLM. The Black Lives Matter movement of the 21st century is an extension of an intergenerational struggle known as the Black Liberation Movement. Both BLMs exemplify the essence and expression of Black humanity. As articulated by Huey P. Newton, one of the founders of the Black Panther Party, we have such a strong desire to live with hope and human dignity that our existence without them is impossible. Our perpetual strivings to maintain our human dignity amidst oppressive realities has been ever present. It should not be understated the importance of focusing on Black people and the unique plight of those existing in a society where the color of their skin and their cultural heritages have been and remain deemed as subhuman or inferior. As evidence of the popular All Lives Matter response to Black Lives Matter, or even the common usage of the phrase people of color in certain instances, there is a concerted effort in society to decenter the distinct perils facing Black people. Despite the fact that the United States as a nation was built and substantially funded through the unjust exploitation of Black labor and ingenuity for over 2 centuries and continuing in evolved forms today. Vagueness and ambiguity has been a tool of oppression since the founding of this country. For example, the phrase justice for all in the US Constitution, eerily similar to the more recent phrase of all lives matter, was not specific, and it certainly excluded numerous groups such as Blacks, women, and people with unique abilities, to name a few. Aside from explicitly racist laws such as Plessy v. Ferguson, many formal and informal injustices persist through the use of proxies such as slaves, urban, and minority, to name a few. Also, many institutions mask the persistence of anti-Black racism by clustering multiple racial and ethnic groups together with terms such as students of color or minorities, even though Black students specifically continue to experience disparate adverse outcomes such as lower graduation rates and underrepresentation in certain academic disciplines. I personally have also used the term of color with endearing intentions, but when I did not define the specific groups I was referencing, I realized the identification and implementation of targeted solutions for these groups were either not considered, overlooked, and/or misdirected. Thus, recognizing our own complicity in perpetuating problematic norms, whether intentionally or unintentionally, is an important step towards restorative justice. Intentionality and clarity are both important, regardless of what terms you choose to use. Therefore, specificity is a necessity for more precisely redressing injustices opposed upon different groups of people. Specifically referencing the sources of discrimination and oppression, whether it be specific races, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, social classes, religious identities, sexual identities, and intersecting identities, is important. We can recognize intersecting oppressions while also honoring the distinctiveness of our respective experiences. Another issue with the phrase people of color is it implicitly suggests in order to value and focus on the issues impacting these groups, we need to cluster them together, which diminishes the uniqueness of their differences between and within groups. These differences include variations in socio-cultural histories, migration patterns and experiences, economic opportunities, and related circumstances. For example, there are a plethora of Africana, Latinx, Latina, Latino, Asian, and indigenous diasporas. The formal and informal oppressions experienced by those who identify with these racial and ethnic groups are not homogeneous or monolithic. Thus, this analysis of the term of color is not an indictment on the term overall, or even an indictment on those who use it, but rather a call for us to be reflective on who is being referenced when the term is used. How can it be co-opted or manipulated, and who is centered versus who is decentered for different purposes and under different circumstances. Specificity and cross-cultural supports are vital tools for collective liberation. As Audre Lorde said, it is not our differences that divide us, but rather our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Both the All Lives Matter statement in response to Black Lives Matter and the use of people of color under certain instances, albeit not all, are subtle reminders that exclusively focusing on Black lives remains taboo and forbidden in society. If I were to ask everyone today if they thought addressing pancreatic cancer is important, or supporting children with autism is important, or providing aid to people who are homeless is important, I would anticipate everyone acknowledging these distinct issues as important without question or comparison to related issues. However, when the statement Black Lives Matter is expressed in a society that codified Black people as property or 3/5 of a person at its founding and continues to perpetuate and exacerbate conditions that oppress this group, there is an instant reaction and almost dismissive response to centering the humanity of Black people, as if it should be assumed that our lives only matter and are worth discussing or focusing on if connected to other human lives. But if the focus is on Black lives alone, then it is either not worth discussing or it should be understood that certain injustices against this group are allowable, since we are supposed to be subhuman or inferior beings. The irony lies in the fact that those who profess the ideology of a supposed supremacy actually promote fallacious ideas and exhibit behaviors that reflect humanity at its worst, or dare I say, not human at all. Whereas those who are supposedly subhuman or inferior have throughout generations promoted ideas and exhibited actions that reflect humanity at its best, such as expressing love, compassion, forgiveness, collectivism, self-determination, creativity, resilience, resistance against oppression, dignity, inclusion, acceptance, and respect. The pervasiveness of this insidious anti-Black racism is evident in the responses to Black death compared to white death. For example, for Black death to result in laws being changed and offenders being charged, let alone convicted, it requires mass protests or social disruptions, whereas for white death, such drastic responses are not necessary. This reality signifies that white life remains being upheld as humanity worthy of consideration and just treatment and protection, whereas Black life is disposable. Related to the response to Black death, we must also acknowledge the inattentiveness or lack of structural changes to the conditions facing Black people while they are alive. These pre-death conditions reflect the prevalence of Black devaluation and dehumanization. One unfortunate commonality between chattel slavery, Jim Crow, Black codes, civil rights movement backlash, the era of mass incarceration, and Black Lives Matter movement backlash is the permanent subjugation of Black people as an inferior group. Despite ongoing Black resistance in concert with non-Black allies, we as a nation and world have yet to fully confront and redress the legacy of anti-Black racism. Understanding this reality, we must center Black people and Blackness precisely because it is uncomfortable and disruptive to the status quo of a society grounded in white racism. Any discomfort we feel is not comparable to the harms inflicted on those impacted by lynchings, police brutality and vigilante violence, systemic economic depression, health disparities, and perpetual devaluation through miseducation, to name a few. By embracing and confronting this discomfort, it allows us the opportunity to activate the deepest forms of conviction and courage humanly possible, such that the pain of those who have been and continue to be unjustly harmed by systems of injustice moves us to strategic action until justice is achieved for all. Throughout history, all have had the choice to either confront or challenge injustice, to allow it to persist, or intensify the injustice through direct perpetuation. I ask everyone here this evening a few questions to ponder. What injustices do you resist? And how do you resist them? What injustices do you ignore or reproduce unconsciously? What injustices do you reinforce consciously? And what are you convicted, courageous, and committed to? Renowned historian Ibram X. Kendi, in his book titled How to Be an Anti-Racist, describes three types of people: racist, non-racist, and anti-racist. According to Kendi, racists are those who support racist policies through their actions or inactions or expressing a racist idea. Non-racists are those who express a neutral stance on racist policies or deny possessing racist ideas or engaging in racist actions. According to Kendi, racists and non-racists serve similar functions in the perpetuation of racist policies and outcomes in society. In contrast, an anti-racist is someone who supports an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. There are two important points about Kendi's definitions that are important to highlight. One, engaging in racist/non-racist or anti-racist behavior is fluid rather than static. Therefore, one must be continually intentional about engaging in anti-racist actions, rather than simply doing something once and claiming to be anti-racist. Hence, everyone has the capacity to engage in racist, non-racist, or anti-racist actions at any given point in time. Secondly, anti-racism focuses on power, policies, and systems as the core reasons for racial injustices, rather than exclusively on individual dispositions and prejudices, although the latter is certainly connected to the former. For example, as we celebrate BLM Day, it is important, necessary, and meaningful to say the names of Black people who were unjustly killed and harmed as a result of anti-Black racist actions. Many of us know the list of the names of those unjustly killed, shot, and brutalized by those intending to inflict harm on their bodies. But even more important, necessary, and powerful than saying their names is being convicted, courageous, and committed to changing the systems, realities, and conditions that preceded and contributed to their untimely deaths. The best way to ensure their lives were not in vain is to commit to a necessary struggle for our righteous calling of creating and sustaining a just world and an optimal humanity. The time for justice is always now. The time for injustice is always never. Both preventative or proactive justice, as well as restorative justice, is necessary for manifesting humanity at its finest. Frederick Douglass, activist, abolitionist, and leader, said, "Those who profess freedom yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by those whom they oppress." Every one of us changes the world every day through our actions and inactions. The power lies in what you choose to fight for and what you choose to ignore, what you speak up about and what you are silent about, what moves you to be committed to change and what keeps you passive and disengaged. Positive communal, institutional, and societal changes occur when compassionate, convicted, and courageous people engage in concerted efforts over a sustained period of time. In the spirit of Black existence, liberation, and empowerment, I would like to share with and encourage each of you to reflect upon the various ways you can utilize your agency, resources, and uniqueness to contribute to the eradication of anti-Black racism. There are several ways each of us can activate our activism and resistance for racial and social justice. Regarding activism, my colleagues and I identified 10 different types of activism that each of us can utilize. The activism typology includes the following types. Number 1, symbolic activism in the form of protests, boycotts, and public demonstrative actions. Scholarly activism through research, teaching, learning, and application. What you learn, what you read, what you cite, what you apply, all matters. Grassroots activism, which involves organizing at the local level to create change within a reasonable proximity. Mass mobilization activism, which involves interstate and international and/or international organizing for broader societal change. Economic activism, financial divestment and investment for racial and social justice aims. Where you spend your time, energy, and money reflects your values. Legal activism, the use of legal and judicial systems to change laws, policies, rules, norms for racial and social justice. Media activism, the use of multimedia, technological resources to foster positive social change. Civic activism, engagement in local, state, national, and international politics to champion racial and social justice. Music and art activism, the use of music and art forms as a form of expression to promote racial and social justice. And military activism, the use of military strategies and resources to secure and sustain racial and social justice. Regardless of which type of activism you seek to pursue, it is important for you to identify in what ways do you want to be a part of improving the world. At different points in time, your choice of activism may differ. Each form of activism is similar to human body parts or tools in a toolkit or positions on a sports team. Each type has a unique contribution, and the interdependent nature of each type contributes to a larger purpose and goal. At times, certain body parts, tools, and/or positions will have more of an emphasis than others. But the ultimate aim is to maximize the effectiveness of each part and the whole for its design purposes. I suggest that all forms of activism are necessary for social transformation and the creation of a world where racial equality is a reality and Black Lives Matter becomes a statement of fact and celebration rather than a necessary form of resistance for an aspiration that has yet to be achieved. In addition to activism, all of us has the capacity to engage in resistance against injustices. There are 8 different ways we can all exhibit resistance. The resistance typology includes, number 1, agency through personal choice and disposition. Your actions and your inactions change the world every day. Through the relationships that you have with individuals within your sphere of influence, they matter. Through pioneering, breaking barriers for groups historically denied access to opportunities. Through advocacy, supporting social change efforts in less disruptive ways compared to activism. Hybrid resistance, engagement in multiple types of resistance efforts across time, space, and context. That means certain instances you're engaged in activism, other instances you're engaged in advocacy, other instances you're exercising your personal agency. That is what we call hybrid resistance. Activism involves engaging in disruptive actions for racial and social justice. Social movements involve protracted collective efforts for sustained social change. Revolutions involve engagement in transforming a previous and current societal structure or structures in pursuit of a more just existence, reality, and systems. And finally, sustained empowerment, transforming a society into a new and better, more just and humane existence. When reflecting on different ways you can exercise your activism and resistance, I call for all administrators, faculty, staff, and students to reflect upon how each of us can collectively manifest the best UMass Boston possible. No one person makes UMass Boston just or unjust. Collectively, we work together to either uphold and sustain human dignity, justice, equity, and respect, or human devaluation, injustice, inequity, and disrespect. My charge to each of you is to identify how will you commit to being a part of the change to make UMass Boston the best version of itself. In closing, there is an undeniable power and uniqueness to unwavering and unapologetic Blackness. It is the essence that has undergirded the prominence of ancient African civilizations, African revolutions, communal and spiritual ways of being, knowing, and doing, the Black liberation movement, the New Negro movement, the Civil Rights movement, the Black Power movement, Black feminist movement, hip hop movement, the Black arts movement, anti-apartheid movement, anti-war movements, Black queer movement, Black trans movement, and human rights movements more broadly. As we are here today, I do not ask for you to stand in the gap. Rather, I am calling for us to stand in the foundation of our righteous calling as human beings and global citizens, convicted, courageous, and committing to manifesting a better humanity, an optimal humanity, and a just humanity and world. Our call to action is to ignite a revolution of our social contract and an evolution of our humanity. Stated again, we need a revolution of our social contract and an evolution of our humanity. Black will no longer be synonymous with negativity, subhuman, or inferiority. There will be times when focusing on Black exclusively is acceptable, understandable, supported, and necessary. Similar to how there will be times when focusing on different identities and groups and issues will be acceptable, understandable, supported, and necessary. Although we acknowledge the racist history and present reality of our society, we are committed to transforming our campus, this state, this region, our nation, and this world into spaces where racism is eradicated and never repeated again. Bear in mind, it was and is within our human capacity to create and reproduce racism, and it is within our human capacity to end it. I repeat, it was and is within our human capacity to create and reproduce racism, and it is within our human capacity to end it. By acknowledging, confronting, and redressing our racist past and present, we can create new and better systems that are not grounded in colonialism, imperialism, anti-Black racism, xenophobia, exclusion, neoliberalism, capitalism, and other oppressive ways of knowing, doing, and being. In concert with our ancestors and those who fought for a better world that they did not live to see, we stand here today with the opportunity and the honor to commit to a necessary struggle for our righteous calling to dismantle previous ways of doing, knowing, and being that perpetuate human hierarchies and injustices, and to create and sustain a new campus, a new state, a new region, a new nation, and a new world grounded in human dignity, justice, respect, equality, empathy, and most importantly, love. Black lives matter, Black people matter, Black families matter, Black communities matter, Black contribution matters, Black love matters, Blackness matters. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, and forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper, for that powerful and thought-provoking keynote address. Next, we have Vice Chancellor Adam Wise of University Advancement. He's going to be talking specifically about the George Floyd Scholarship, how to donate, and why it was created.
Thanks very much, Pilar. And I am humbled to go after Joe. Dr. Cooper, that was extraordinary. I'm taking notes along the way. I know that's being recorded, which is terrific, I believe, but really just extraordinary for folks to hear. My name is Adam Wise. Hello, everyone. Vice Chancellor for Advancement, as Pilar said. Advancement, in some respects, is called Alumni Relations and Development. So you know, I began at UMass Boston in September 2018, and before that, I was at Boston University for 24 years. But really, to our students here today, please know that this advancement office, which is located at Healy 11, when we come back to campus, please come on up. But it's an alumni community of over 110,000 graduates. It is big. We look forward to welcoming you upon graduation into the UMass Boston family. It is a large group of people, and we look forward to having you there. Today, though, I must say, I must applaud you all, not just for the seminar, for the dialogue, the actualization, the call to action, but for coming together as a campus to establish UMass Boston for Black Lives Matter. I can tell you firsthand, in my field, we do a lot of events. We do seminars. You will see when you graduate. We'll invite you to gatherings, whether you're in Los Angeles or Chicago or Baltimore or maybe somewhere abroad. We're doing activities in those areas. It is not easy to create a day like today. And to do it remotely is even more difficult. Hats off to all of you, to Pilar, to Rochelle, to Dr. Cooper and Neville and your teams. This was not easy. And I congratulate all of you to pull this off. Just extraordinary. I wanted to mention just briefly, as Pilar mentioned, something that I think interacts with today and something that's important about today, which is our new chancellor, who you heard from, Marcelo Suarez Orozco, reached out before he had begun in his chancellor role here. This was earlier in the summer, to say that he and his wife, Carola, wanted to establish a scholarship at UMass Boston to acknowledge, to honor, to remember Mr. Floyd. Together, Marcelo and Carola, although they weren't looking for their name in lights, they didn't want it named after themselves, they made a $50,000 gift to establish the George Floyd Honorary Scholarship Fund at UMass Boston. And this is for UMass Boston students. In fact, there are 2 students today who are the inaugural Floyd scholarships. In fact, they may even be on the Zoom today, or now or earlier, I'm not sure. But it's pretty extraordinary what our chancellor did. And what he did, which I think was also very special, was he made this an endowment gift. It's a gift that goes into a fund. That fund is professionally managed, and every year a portion of the money that the value of the fund has kicks out and supports a scholarship. So this lives in perpetuity. In some respects, most respectfully, this is a way that the UMass Boston family can honor Mr. Floyd in some small way in perpetuity. His name lives on here on campus, and each year, there are at least 2, and there will be more as this grows, Mr. Floyd is honored here. And I think that that's a very special thing that UMass Boston has done, and certainly our chancellor did. Now I say this, and I ask you all here too for sensitivity in this. We have endeavored to be quite careful to honor the family, trying to honor Mr. Floyd. We contacted Benjamin Crump, who's the attorney for the Floyd family. So they were aware that UMass Boston was doing this. We did not want to and do not want to have the appearance that we are trying to raise money in the midst of this tragedy. We all witnessed firsthand Mr. Floyd being killed. And we in no way want to have an appearance that we are trying to raise funds from that tragedy. What we're trying to do, and what I believe the chancellor is trying to do, is to honor our scholarship students who deserve resources, and perhaps folks who wish to step forward and honor Mr. Floyd would do that here. And that's a way that we call kind of a virtuous cycle. Some folks can contribute, perhaps that supports some students. Down the road, those students perhaps might do the same kind of thing. It becomes a virtuous cycle. As I said, we didn't push this out. We didn't try to advertise this in order to raise funds. It was just quietly done. $130,000 has been raised so far. And that's the corpus that began to support these students. But we did choose not to promote this scholarship. I believe today is the first time we're really doing this. I was between kind of notes, I was trying to get on the web, which I just did. We have raised, and I say this we loosely, but Pilar and the team had set a goal, but we raised almost $1,000. I think we're at $985 just today. But interestingly enough, if you go back a couple of days, we've raised $1,450. So people came, I think, in advance, and folks stepped forward. Do know that you look at this number of 130,000 that has been raised, and someone might think they're $10 or $25 doesn't make a difference. It does. It does because people come together, and that compounding creates an impact. And that's what an endowment really does. The scholarship lifts together. And I think in some respects, that's a part of today's conversation. It's kind of coming together, it's working together, it's a conversation and understanding together, and you all come together to create this virtuous cycle. Pilar has placed, I believe, in the Black Lives Matter page, a website, and you can click on it if you wish to join and make a gift for those who haven't. To the George Floyd Scholarship Fund. That's where it goes into, and it will only support UMass Boston students. Every year I contribute actually to the Beacon Student Aid Fund, but in light of today, I made an additional gift to the Black Lives Matter Fund because it's very important that we continue to support this fund. To all of you who wish to do it, I must say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing today. Thank you for all that you've done and will do in the future as UMass Boston graduates. And I'm just honored to be here. And hopefully, in the future, we will continue to grow and to honor the mission that you all have laid out in this first wonderful day for Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Wise. Before we close and give some special recognition to those who have been involved in planning this day, I wanted to open it up to the panelists as well as you guys as the audience for any final words. If you would like to speak from the attendees, you can raise your hand and we will allow you to speak. And for the panelists, feel free to unmute yourself.
We do have a question in the Q&A. An anonymous attendee asked, does the George Floyd Scholarship target Black students specifically? Is there someone who's able to speak to which students are eligible to receive the scholarship?
So the financial aid office and the admission office handles all that, and students are able to reach out to them. I'm not involved in any selection process in any way, but the scholarship was designed specifically for that. So yes, the intention is to try to honor a student. Oh, my screen's just changing here. I don't know if I'm going off. I guess I'm still on here. So yes, students are able to apply. Just so you know, because of some of the changes that have happened in society, and it gets into some of what Dr. Cooper was talking about, you can't set up a scholarship fund that only targets one individual or another. Years ago, you could do this. So we now say with preference to. And that's the way this scholarship is set up. It is with preference to someone, an individual, male or female, who is Black. But that doesn't get any of the institutions, this is pretty true across the board, into any trouble with lawsuits and all the rest, because you can't selectively pick someone with blue eyes and green hair who lives in New York. It's just not the way you can do that anymore. But yes, that's what the preference is for, and that's the way the chancellor had established it.
Thank you. And we have another question in the Q&A chat. Maybe you can speak to this as well. Who's on the selection committee, or what does that process look like?
Again, I am not, so I helped to raise the money, as often is the case in a big, hairy, burly institution like UMass Boston, where there are all sorts of faculty and students and different departments around. The financial aid office makes that determination. I would just suggest for someone who's interested, perhaps to reach out to them. I know this, obviously the selection has been made for this year. It would then be something for next year. Sorry, I can't be more helpful. It's just not, it's not in my wheelhouse. It's what admissions and financial aid does.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other final thoughts, we will move to the last section of the program, and that is special thanks and gratitude. So bear with me while I transition to my screen here. Okay. So I would like to give special recognition and gratitude to the following. First is the Planning Committee. I really want to highlight the Planning Committee because we worked really, really hard in a very short amount of time with very limited resources. Each and every one of these names you see on the slide has been instrumental in making sure that this day can come into fruition. And I personally like to thank and give my gratitude to each and every one of these individuals. I would like to acknowledge the following. Each and every one of these individuals on this slide has contributed to BLM Day to make it a success. And I would like to acknowledge each and every one of these individuals on the slide as well. And then finally, I want to thank some of our sponsors, Quinn Graphics, Mass Media, the Office of Housing and Residential Life, the Division of Student Affairs and Marketing and Engagement Office, who have contributed significantly to making sure that BLM Day at UMass Boston can happen today. That being said, I hope that you enjoyed the rest of your evening today. And we look forward to seeing you next year, hopefully in person, for our Black Lives Matter ceremony for 2021. Have a great day, go vote if you choose to, and thank you.